politician. I'm currently serving the Minnesota House of Representatives. And I signed up for my first political campaign in a high school just like this, when I read these following words from U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy. And he said, and I quote, "Through no virtues of our own, we have been fortunate enough to be born in the United States under the most comfortable conditions. We, therefore, have a responsibility to those less well off." Words, no doubt, the epitome of the American dream. Now today, I'm not here to convince you politically or change your economic ideology or to change your judgment in meriting one issue over the other. But I hope that today I can share with you a little story that can help urge you to rethink and to search out for your own American dream story within your own family. And ultimately to push you to help those in our country so that they too can reach their American dream also. And so living here in Minnesota in the United States, my family was very poor. My mother raised us with food stamps, we lived in public housing, and my father, after working in America for almost up to 30 years, still makes less than $15 an hour. But despite all of this, some may say that these are the symptoms of what is wrong with the American dream or why it can't change. But I tell you that my family's story and the context of history tells us, like in the words of President Bill Clinton, what is wrong with America can be changed by what is right with America. And so today I hope to share with you a little story about this little boy. And today here at TEDx, I hope that you can take this journey with me. The year is 1973. In the other side of the globe, the town of Longcheng, Laos, in Southeast Asia. It is a warm tropical night in this town. And this town is the US CIA secret military base in Laos, where the relatively unknown Hmong tribal people have lived and served alongside Americans to fight back communism during the Vietnam War. And on this night, our young boy in our story wakes up to a loud boom. Waking up half dazed, looking for his shoes, he walks to his living room floor, the cold tile floors, and his home is on fire. The wall is missing, a bomb had just hit their house. Outside of his door, his family's home, the wall is missing, and he could see the Longcheng runway where bombs are hitting helicopters. And he could see these helicopters break in half like candy bars. And suddenly, one Vietnamese soldier comes running through the front of his door. Shots ring out. Right behind the fallen soldier that fell right in front of the boy's father comes running in with a rifle. He had just shot the soldier. The boy's father was carrying a rifle, and the boy's 2-year-old sister on his back with a Hmong plania, or baby cloth carrier. And so with that, the father said to the boy, "Kiddo, what are you still doing here?" And he lifted up the boy with his left hand, rifle still in his right hand, and the baby on his back. 2 more shots. The boy's father shoots another soldier that is running to attack their home. That soldier falls down, face up, looking at the boy. The boy can see the blood and guts pouring down onto the tile floors. This was the boy's last memory of Longcheng, Laos. The Americans and the Hmong would hold out for 2 more years, but immediately after the attack, the boy and his family would move south of Longcheng for security, to find a safer place. The Hmong and the Americans would hold out until May 14, 1975, and that's when the Americans left. A year after, the boy's mother died after giving childbirth. There was a lack of medicine, a lack of food. The 2-year-old daughter that the father was carrying when he shot the 2 communist soldiers, that 2-year-old died. There was no food, no medicine, no doctors. The local shaman only said she passed away because of the sound of the gunfire. And so now the communists had won inside of Laos. And so any Hmong family that assisted the Americans, they were being targeted. Village after village were falling to the communist army that was on their way. Soon the boy's family was attacked. Their village was attacked. The boy's father could have ran away like many other Hmong families that fled to Thailand. But he had 7 little children, and one of the children was less than 1 year old. A crying baby in the jungles could mean a death sentence to any group of Hmong trying to flee Laos. Fleeing from Laos to Thailand took weeks, sometimes even months. And so on this day, a communist fort was set up on the nearby mountain overlooking their village. The boys' home and all the village homes were all bombed. The villagers and the boys' family ran to the nearby jungles to hide in the bushes. They looked on as their villages were being bombed. Next to the boys' family was their young neighbor, a young pregnant woman. She began to murmur about pain in her ribs, and so her husband and her mother-in-law began to rub her back and her ribs to ease the pain. But soon she began to turn pale. The bombings continued on for hours. The boy's father, looking at the suffering, looking at the frightened faces of all his neighbors and villagers, all the young men have left. There's no fighting back. So the boy's father turned to an elderly aunt nearby, and he said, "Neba, or auntie, do you have a pandao?" he said. And a pandao is a Hmong story cloth. Here in Minnesota, many of you probably have seen these in Hmong homes or in Hmong stores. And so he asked for that pandao from the elderly woman. She gave it to him, and he broke off a peach tree branch nearby. He tied the white pandao onto the peach tree branch to turn it into a flag. And then he turned to all those gathered, and he said, "We will go surrender to the communists. We cannot fight back. There's too much suffering. We must go surrender. I'm going to carry this flag back to the village hill and wave it. And if they stop the bombing, I want you all to follow me in a single file line. But if they should shoot me, please take my 7 children and run deeper into the jungle." And so with those parting words, the boy's father turned and headed back to the village. The boy and his sisters began crying, pounding their chests, collapsing to the ground, yelling to their father they don't want to be orphans. They looked on as their father approached the entrance tree hill. He stood up there waving his flag. The boy thought to himself, okay, what if the communists just come and shoots him point blank? And seeing their father rolling down the hill, what are they going to do? And then the boy thought about his father, the old radio chief in the great Hmong army during the American War, helping the Americans, directing construction crews in Longchang, wearing the handsome U.S. Army uniform. But all of this, none of this, was the same anymore. His father was on that hill right now, in torn Hmong clothes. No Americans to help him. And so the boy thought about how his heart would rage if the communists came and punched his father or kicked his father. And soon, eventually, a small trickle rolled on a trail. The communist soldiers started trickling down the mountains in green-clad uniforms and bright oiled-up AK-47s. When they approached the boy's father, the commanding officer signaled for the boy's father to come down the hill. The boy's father and the commander talked. They talked long and intensely. Then the boy's father turned around to the villagers and waved for them to come back. And so all of the villagers that day surrendered to the communists as a conquered people at their mercy. And so after the seven years would follow, the boy's family would be moved by the communist government deep into communist territory. There were still Hmong rebels fighting back. And so living in the deep in the jungles, up in the mountains, the Hmong family had tried to avoid government contact as much as possible. The boy's father would change his name, and he would rarely see his 7 children. The boy's father would only come to see his children in the rice fields, and sometimes pretending to wear women's clothes so he wouldn't be recognized. Living like this for 7 years. Then one day they came to the boy's village. The government came to each and every one Hmong village and started making marks on their doors, their front doors. An X for the number of sons in that family, and an O for Any Hmong family that had more than one son, would have to send one son to join the new communist army, to fight against Hmong rebels. And so in the boy's family, he had an older brother. So he thought, now I'm a teenager, I could run away to Thailand and come back to save my family later. And so in 1982, the young boy in this picture, my father, who is here in this room with us, standing over there, he made it to Thailand. For months fleeing the Laotian jungles to get to Thailand, to come to America. He ran away with 12 young Hmong men and boys. 6 would pass away before they crossed the border. 1 to gunfire, 1 to a landmine, 1 to snake bite, 2 to enemy fire, and 1 to friendly fire, just yards from crossing the Mekong, making it to freedom. And so with that, my father made it to America, and he went back to sponsor and bring my grandfather, the former captain, here to the United States. Here in America, it was not easy. There's many struggles. But my family, we live near the Plaza townhomes on Highway 94 in St. Paul. And in the 1990s, my grandfather lived with us. And one day you could see the state capitol from our neighborhood. And one day I was with my grandfather, and he was talking to me and pointing at the state capitol. You know, today we may be lowly refugees without a country, but if we work hard, America will reward us. So for you too, work hard, go to school, and one day you too can sit in that state capitol. And with those words, I was 10 years old at that time. I didn't know what he was talking about. I was more afraid that he was going to lecture me or hit me. And so, but as I got older, his message started to unravel. As the more I learned about American history, the more hope I had, the harder I tried to work. Today, here in America, we all are part of a journey together, regardless of where your family came from. Like in the words stated by U.S. Senator RFK, we can take the comfort, the security, and the opportunities that America gave us and use it to do something beneficial for this country, to repay this country, to help those less well off, to move our country forward. Now, standing here before you as a state representative, there are many things that goes on at the Capitol in politics, but I hope that after this TED Talk, I charge you and urge you that if you go back and seek your own story, and when you do find it, you too will want to be motivated and be urged to go and make a difference, to be motivated to help find and help others reach their American dream. And this is an old story, an old American story. You could think back to the Old West, where everyone was heading out west, where the strong, the leaders, and the privileged took it upon themselves to take care of everyone, to make sure everyone made it out safely to the west. And so in this country, we all have that story. Each its own strand in the American Pandao, or story cloth. Whether they're your ancestors or pilgrims, Scandinavians, Germans, Irish, Cubans, or others up until now. We all are part of this story together. And it is a wonderful story. And so for today, I hope that you too, when you go home, you will go search out your own American dream story. And that you too will be motivated to help America become a more perfect union. So thank you.